This podcast is a TOFOP production.
Head to tofop.com for more.
The following episode of TOFOP is rated MA for mature audiences. It may contain sexual references, time travel references, allegations of bin misconduct, and mild coarse language. TOFOP advises that this episode is not suitable for anyone under the age of 15 or anyone who thinks a comedy conversation between two old mates sounds like a terrible idea for a show. Minors must be accompanied by a parent or guardian. This is John Deek speaking.
Everyone relaxed. This is TOFOP. I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Wil Anderson. Hello, and thank you for watching.
And Will, I think all those people who've been suspicious about 5G, they're onto something. They are onto something because we just tried to record an episode using our brand new 5G dongles and the whole thing shat itself. So I agree with those people who say not only does it kill bumblebees, but it stops the godfathers of Australian podcasting, Charlie Clausen, Wil Anderson, from recording an episode of TOFOP.
I mean, a couple of dongles have been stopped by a dongle. So here's what I would say. I'm not sure the 5G conspiracies are ever that it's shit, that it's trying to silence podcasters. The conspiracies are normally that it works so well that it's killing bumblebees and giving you COVID. Like, I don't think much of the conspiracy around 5G is that 5G is just shit, that it's not actually as good as 3G. It's like, you know, like... It's like Scream 5 or something like that. It's like, you know what? It's still good, but it's actually not as good as Scream 1 or 2.
Yeah, I get that. It's just that, you know, I've been doing my research, Will. I've been doing my own research. And when it came to, it's funny, isn't it? Like, we bring up Elon Musk 2 weeks ago about should we get Starlink? And then suddenly Elon Musk is the savior of the Ukraine. Elon Musk is the savior of the New South Wales floods, sending out bloody satellite dishes. Is it time to appeal to? I know we've said some pretty bad things about Elon Musk, but is it time to put an appeal out to Elon Musk to say, "Hey, mate, can you chuck us a dish? Our podcast is suffering."
Mate, this is what I don't get about Elon Musk is he could do so much more than he does. Whenever he is asked for help, he does what I would consider to be the bare minimum for somebody who has the resources that he has, right? Like, I think that he could, like, he's so far richer than the next richest person that, like, the level of spending that he would have to do. And all he does is send a few satellites somewhere or sends a few emergency packs to Australia. And then everyone's like, Elon Musk is the best. Look what he's done. It's the equivalent of you or I walking past somebody and giving them a 1 cent coin. And they're like, oh, thanks, man. It's really good to have this 1 cent coin currency that nowhere will actually accept anymore. You are a real legend. You're a hero.
Well, what would you, if you could turn him into a good billionaire, what's he doing? Like anything is possible. You can turn him into Batman. You can turn him into George Soros. Like, what are you molding him into?
Well, here's what I would say about Elon Musk is I think that some of the things that he does have good intentions. So I would get somebody in externally to have a look at what he does. Pick out 2 or 3 of the things that he said. So here's what I reckon about Elon Musk. Elon Musk says 150 things, and like 3 of them are actually good ideas or work or are good for the planet, right?
Yeah.
And because 3 of them are such good ideas, everybody else then listens to all the other ideas he has as if they are those 3 ideas. Because like most people don't have 3 good ideas in their life. But the problem is that we have to sift through so much shit to get to those good ideas. So I think what we need is Elon Musk to have an external assessor of the quality of his ideas. So he goes into a room and then he's like, here are my ideas for the day. Here are my 6 things that I'm going to say. One of them might be absolute genius that will revolutionize the world. 5 of them are probably complete nonsense that'll screw a bunch of people over. You choose. I have no idea which one is which. Like, I'm just going to say them all. I mean, it's kind of like me doing my trial shows for stand-up. Yeah. I've got a bunch of things I'm going to say, and based on how much you guys laugh at them, they're the bits that'll stay in the show. I don't think that Elon needs an editor. That's all I'm saying. He needs a middleman.
Or a writer's room. He's saying what he needs is a writer's room. He needs a bunch of guys sitting around, and girls sitting around a room with like a whiteboard, and they're like, okay, so all right, let's just scratch out calling a diver a pedophile. That's probably not going to get us much traction. But you're onto something here.
Right. So this is the thing. He comes in and he's like, you know, we're going to live on Mars. I want to have electric cars for everybody, for the environment, and people in Thailand are pedophiles. Most of them, but particularly heroes rescuing people, are pedophiles. And you're like, okay, cool. There's your three ideas for the
two out of
day.
three.
Now let's bounce them around the room and see which one feels sticky.
Well, I actually know someone who is quite close with Elon Musk, has spent quite a bit of time with Elon. And they were saying...
I suspect I know the person you're talking about.
Oh, really? This person was saying that, like, Elon often, like, when he's having friends over a party or whatever, like, they will have to scramble to get the phone out of his hand because he's like, I want to send this text out. Do you think this is a good idea? And everyone's like, no, Elon, that's a bad idea. And you're very famous and well known. Don't do that. It might come back to bite you. But he's got this kind of, like, in the same way, like a teenager might want to flame someone online, like Elon Musk, an extremely powerful businessman and philanthropist, is like, I think I'm going to flame someone on Twitter.
You know what we've got to do?
What?
For the sake of humanity, we've got to cut off Elon Musk's hands. Because, like, the thing is, his hands aren't what, has made him the person that he is, the ideas person that he is. It's all in his brain. So the hands are what are betraying him. Because his brain's like, I should send this out on Twitter. If he didn't have any hands, he wouldn't be able to send that out on Twitter, right? So, okay, we've also got to cut out his tongue. So he can't do voice memos. So we've got to cut off his hands and cut out his tongue. And then just keep him in a room with his ideas that he can now only communicate to a certain amount of people because he doesn't have hands or a tongue.
Too much excess
they can
baggage.
Be funneled out to the world.
That's very inefficient. We just need the brain. Can we just get Elon Musk's brain and stick that in a jar somewhere? So we just keep the brain pumping out those big ideas, but we don't need the hands or the tongue or really the rest of the body at all. Just get the brain in a jar.
Well, you know what we've got to do? We've got to put Elon Musk's brain in one of those monkeys that survived his mind control experiments. There was a couple who snuck in. And so what we should do is get Elon... Oh, no, because then we're going to have a super smart but very erratic... like monkey in charge.
Yeah, we're going to have like Caesar, that monkey from Planet of the Apes.
Yeah. Oh, wouldn't it be great if that's the backstory? There's your gritty reboot. Caesar, the movie. It's the backstory of Caesar, and it turns out that Caesar became Caesar because the smartest person in the world was doing that kind of is the backstory.
I was going to say, I think they made that film 10 years ago.
Yeah, so it's not much. It's kind of like it's a requel, right?
Yeah,
but this time it's
limited
set
series.
In modern day times, and it's Elon Musk.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it for Netflix. It's a limited series. I mean, I wonder if there is something to that idea of like these monkeys that Elon's got and this obsession with going to Mars. Like, if we go back to sort of sending, because we don't know what Mars is going to be like for humans, so we go back to sending like animals into space.
Good. We do know. You're wrong. We absolutely know what Mars is going to be like for human beings. Completely unlivable and an absolute pipe dream. And we actually have a planet that already works that is a Goldilocks planet in the middle of an infinite universe. And we don't need to go to some dead old planet to see if we can live there instead.
Boring. I want to see Mars. And I want to send a monkey up there first so we know what it feels like under our feet. We put the monkey on the ground. We get the monkey to scoop up some soil and bring it back to us. But in the trip back, it passes through some cosmic kind of field and it gets super intelligent and it comes back to SpaceX. But now Elon is no longer the smartest person at SpaceX. This monkey, because it passed through this cosmic field, it irradiated its brain and made it a super smart monkey. It comes down and it does a boardroom challenge on SpaceX. It ousts Elon Musk from his own company. And now the monkey's running SpaceX.
The monkey's being interviewed by Joe Rogan.
Smoking weed. But it'd be amazing. And then the monkey's like, you know what? Look, I'm telling you, I've been there. I am the one person on this planet qualified to say we don't go to Mars. I went there. It sucked. Sure, my brain got irradiated on the way back and now I'm super intelligent. But that just gives me greater reason to say we should be putting all our efforts into making this planet habitable. All of a sudden, Tesla cars, they're free.
Be like, everyone would be like, nah, we've got to kill the super smart monkey and we've got to get up there and go through that same thing and make ourselves super smart, right?
Yeah. That's quick would that monkey
He'd get on with his rockets.
Yeah. That monkey would be dead in seconds if it came back and said that.
I mean, Elon Musk already has a record of killing a bunch of monkeys. We know that he doesn't mind having monkey blood on his hands. So he's going to try to assassinate the monkey immediately.
Well, that monkey, so the monkey's come back and he said, all right, look, here's what I found out. Like, that Mars it's an absolute pipe dream. I did all the readings up there. There's no way we can terraform it. There's no way we can get enough oxygen. Gravity is too big. My balls were hanging real low. As we know, that is one of the most terrifying things about a planet with gravity stronger than Earth's. Your balls get really heavy, and no one wants that. And ladies, you don't want your boobs getting heavy either.
Well, but your balls in particular, like on a red hot planet already, the idea that your testicles could just be bobbing around like a tea bag about to go into some hot tea. No, thank you.
No way. I don't want it touching that red hot sand. Apparently Mars isn't actually red though. Like it's kind of fairly, I think that's a lot of the attraction of people wanting to go to Mars. It's like, ooh, it's like red sand, but it's kind of just like muted dirt colors. It just appears red from where we are.
Yeah. Well, we appear blue mostly, like from space, right? Because like the majority of, like Earth is still water, is the oceans. And turns out the majority of the northern rivers where we live is also water and oceans these days. So it's a real experience.
How has it been coming back to the northern rivers? Were you shocked?
Fuck, man. Like I did a week of shows in Adelaide, after it flooded, because I could not get back. The airports were closed and all the highways were closed. And so there was no reason for me to actually come back. My house was completely cut off. In fact, one of the roads, like there is only one way to get out of my house now, that one of the ways has been cleared, and they think it's going to take a year to clear the other road because of all the damage. So it basically just means that, we only had two ways to access the outside world, and now we have one, and it's a pretty tenuous one. The only reason we can actually get out the other way is because some locals rebuilt a bridge. The council came along and said, you can't do this. And the locals went, yeah, but you're not going to be here to see if we do it. So instead, just for a day, went down there, like a bunch of blokes who knew what they were doing, of course, went down there with and just rebuilt this bridge themselves. So essentially to get anywhere, Charlie, I'm driving over a artisanal bridge, a farm to table bridge, a homemade bridge that was made by the community with a bucket of donations and some people bringing beers and food along to make sure that the people are okay.
Have you ever felt more useless? Like I was saying to Jem, I was doing some drop-offs yesterday, and I was seeing all these people like pitching in and, helping out and repairing. And I'm like, none of my skills are useful in this scenario. Like all I can do, I can lug things as discussed, I can carry things from one spot to another, which I guess is kind of useful, but it doesn't set me apart. It's not like I haven't seen any call outs on social media for, can we have someone who can carry stuff from this spot to the other? Like that's kind of a given that everyone will be able to do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, firstly, I did a week of shows in Adelaide and still made it here before most of the army and the Prime Minister. So that's a bit of an indication of how much of a priority it was for the rest of the fucking country. Like, it was incredible actually being in Adelaide to see the lack of coverage of what was happening on the northern rivers, because this is a natural disaster, a climate emergency disaster on the same scale as the bushfires now. Those bushfires that captured the world, of course, pre-COVID, when those sort of things were, I guess, more shocking still. But those bushfires captured the absolute world, whereas these floods, which will end up destroying probably more homes than the bushfires did. More people will be homeless as a result of it. And it looks like by the end of it, there'll probably be more deaths out of the... But even that idea of how many deaths is acceptable has been so reframed by COVID that the idea of 30 people died in a bushfire or whatever, as a country, we used to come to a full stop and go, this is unacceptable. We've got to do something about this. We've got to help all these people. Whereas COVID has reset our acceptance for daily deaths, right?
It's like... That's how you know it's a bad tragedy, is when Midnight Oil reformed to play a benefit. You're like, okay, we're on midnight oil level of a disaster here.
Yeah, the only oil that isn't responsible for the climate emergency we find ourselves in, midnight oil.
You may find when you're walking around the Northern Rivers in the next few months, you might see a few more TOFOP t-shirts, not because people are rushing to the Redbubble page to support our show and James Fosdyke, but when it came to donating a lot of stuff, I had a surplus of TOFOP t-shirts, and I was kind of conflicted about handing them out. Not because I didn't want to help, but I'm like, are people going to want to wear this? Even in the state of a natural disaster, is someone going to get their care package and be like, what the hell is this? What is this? Like, it's two skeletons having a cuddle. I don't want to wear this.
I won't have all of the details of this joke right, but I think it's worth mentioning regardless. I think it might have been Rich Hall, and he might have been talking about the people of Adelaide and the way the people in Adelaide dressed. But forgive me if I'm remembering that wrong and it was somebody else, but he described it as floodwear. And he said everyone here dresses as if it was the only clothes they had on in the middle of a flood, and that is what they are wearing. And I think people walking around in TOFOP t-shirts who have never listened to the podcast before, and to be honest, will refuse to in the future because it'll remind them of a really terrible time of walking around advertising our show in floodwear. TOFOP merchandise. It's floodwear.
Well, it's actually funny. I did a drop-off in Broadwater yesterday. They were calling out for donations, so I went and got some stuff. And the girl who was running the relief centre, Ria, is a TOFOP listener, and not just a TOFOP listener, but has flown out to LA to see us at LA Podfest. It was so weird because I was just carrying some stuff up, and she was like, "Charlie," and I'm like, "Yeah," and she's like, "Oh, you don't know me, but I listen to TOFOP," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." This is a weird spot to kind of be recognized, but
did you say this situation is dire, Ria, just to break the tension?
Yeah, she loved it. She laughed and she laughed. We all had a great laugh.
And she said, ironically, a lot of people have diarrhea because one of the things that comes with floods is gastro, because there are so many germs all over the place and people aren't eating. And like everybody's fridges, man. Like, so I flew from Adelaide back here, and by that stage, you know, the army, at least kind of the Defence Force and stuff, had arrived. And in places like Mullumbimby, the water had gone down. But to drive through that town, the first thing that I saw when I came back was like to drive through Mullumbimby and to see, I don't think people realize what it's like when it's like the contents of everybody's homes are just sitting on the lawn in front of their homes or on the nature strip in front of their homes, because everything that they had inside their homes has been destroyed and it now is just landfill. Like there's a year's worth of landfill, I think, just in that town, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, because,
if not more,
you know, fridges and like, you know, mattresses and just like all of these big items are just completely fucked. Nothing you can do about it. They just have to be thrown out. And like so many of those homes and buildings and, you know, our vet clinic is condemned, you know, like, you know, there was enough water that went through all those sort of things that, you know, these businesses and people are just going to have to be rebuilding for fucking years. And that's the first thing you see. That's not even the worst place where the floods have been in the area. But I mean, they had it pretty bad in Mullen, but to drive through that town and that to be the first thing you saw was just like everyone in town had put everything that was inside their houses outside their houses. It's like, that's not where that stuff's meant to be. No. It feels really weird. You're like, maybe on a hard rubbish night, you're meant to see a few things on the nature strip, but it was just a real immediate, like it was going through a procession of people's misery and lives lost. And it's just like immediately you just took a deep breath and knew that it was going to be hard work.
Yeah, and you also take a deep breath because the combination of like sewage, fuel, rotting furniture. Like I was in Lismore again on Friday. Oh, by the way, I went past the picture framers. Yeah, no, you're definitely not getting that artwork back anytime soon.
Unless it floats down the road to my house, I think is the only way we're going to get that artwork back.
Yeah, well, look, hopefully, I mean, maybe they got out in time, but that entire store is empty, condemned as well. Like there's nothing left. But yeah, the street that I was the main street I was helping out on when I went back this time, I don't know what it seemed like there were multiple council trucks were there. There were bulldozers, bobcats, multiple volunteers, just like shifting all that debris that you see stacked outside of people's homes into these like fleet of garbage trucks. But even cleared away, all it does is just expose how bad the damage is. Like you've still got homes that are absolutely fucked. Like that's the thing that I wonder about is like what's the housing situation and what's the long-term solution to this? I mean, I know all around people are letting families come stay, and you know, you go online, there's lots of people offering up their homes around here, which is great. But that's not a long-term solution. And just the idea of like you see high schools and hospitals in this town that are all deserted, and it's like, how do you can't just migrate that instantly. That's a huge process. And that's also people's lives. You know, you sort of see I saw these kids walking around like teenagers walking around the streets, just looking at obviously the town that they grew up in. And it's like, that's going to be incredibly scarring for a lot of kids, is to sort of lose that base. I remember being a teenager when I lost my dad, or coming into my teens, and it's such a destabilizing experience, because that's when you're sort of just sticking your head out into the world as an adult. And if your first experience of being an adult is the world's a terrifying fucking place where everything can be turned upside down in an instant, that has long-term effects, like that's stuff that I'm still sort of dealing with now. And just to think like that's happened en masse, it just boggles my mind what is going to happen in the future. And it can't all just be telethons and GoFundMes and stuff. Like there needs to be like, and I say this knowing that there isn't, but there needs to be like a really fucking well-researched plan of how we're going to get forward and how we're going to get out of this, and not just about winning votes and getting a government in. Like, even if it's a reactionary vote against the Liberal Party to get Labor in, well, we need to see Labor's plan as well. This is not just about punishing one side of politics. It's about pressuring all of them to actually do something.
Yeah, because you say that there is no plan. There are heaps of plans. Like, scientists have been coming up with plans for a very long time now. There is all these ways that we can immediately accelerate away from fossil fuels into renewables, into different energy sources, and because we talk about this idea of it being this thing that we're dealing with in the future. I think the thing that is incredibly apparent to us all now is that climate change is here.
Yeah.
This is not a theoretical argument about what the effects of it, like this, even the idea that our government has this, fund that is saving for a rainy day. And
ironic, a rainy day.
Apparently this day is not rainy enough. This is what the government is saying.
Yeah.
They believe there's a rainier day coming along. We shouldn't be stopping the boats. We should be building arcs.
Yeah.
This is basically the stage we're at. If this is not if a once in 100 or 1,000 or 3,500 year storm isn't enough to go, this is the rainy day is here, that means that they know as a government that there are going to be rainier days soon where we need that money. So let that terrify the fuck out of you for a second. Like, the idea that they think this is not enough, this is not the real emergency, we're going to need this money for later. Well, let's spend that money now on mitigating rather than having to fucking repair it and deal with it later. There are things we can do to prevent these things from happening. And every dollar spent preventing these things from happening, you actually repay tenfold rather than having to do the cleanup and rebuild people's lives later. Like, it's the magnitude of the ramifications it will have for people who live in this area. But it's only this area this time. 2 years ago, it was Mallacoota in Victoria going through the same thing with fires. And people in Mallacoota hadn't recovered from the fires when fucking COVID hit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's, and now they're seeing, and now there's less and less interest. Like, the telethon didn't raise as much money. No one's like as excited about like trying to get behind this. Like, it's fucking terrifying, Charlie. It's like people have lost everything up here. And, it's to see that in the community, like you said, to smell the smell of death, like the stench of mold and death. Like, a lot of these buildings are condemned because of the mold. The water gets in, or there's asbestos in the walls or whatever. So once you're flooded, you just got to fucking demolish the whole place. And how are they going to rebuild anything? Because where are they going to get the building supplies? Where are they going to get the tradies to do it all? Like, you can't just, it's not a part of the world where you have even the capacity to do that. So even if you ended up getting the money to do it at some stage, it's going to be years before you can actually get someone to help you rebuild your house, if that's what you're going to do. So, and this is just going to be a story played out all over the fucking world, but particularly in Australia. We've known since John Howard was Prime Minister, I would say before that, but at least, like, on the record, certified since John Howard was Prime Minister, we've known in this country that Australia would be amongst like the first world countries that was most affected by climate change. I remember talking to Dave Anthony when Trump happened and he was thinking about leaving America. And I was like, well, why don't you come and live in Australia? Like, you got a good following here. Like, it's a good way of life. You get to do heaps of, fun things here. Come and live in Australia. And he was just like, I never would because of climate change. Yeah. You guys are just going to be the first fucked by climate change. And It pains me to say this, Charlie, but Dave really does get some really horrible things right.
Yeah.
I wish he didn't. Like, I wish the things that he was. I don't think he's right about them rigging the NBA. I cannot be convinced about that. But fucking hell.
Well, ABC,
Yes.
you know Matt Bevan, the ABC journalist. He has a great series of podcasts. He did Russia If You're Listening, and now he's doing Australia If You're Listening, which is all about climate change. And the actual first recorded instance where someone speculated that the country we lived in is more susceptible to changing like climates was 1911. Like he found a news article where a scientist is like, hey guys, we've been running the numbers and, you know, if we keep putting this much, the Industrial Revolution has been fantastic, but if we keep putting this much carbon into the atmosphere, we're going to be fucked. And it's like, I imagine the Andrew Bolt of 1911 would have been, oh, look at this climate alarmist. La-di-da-di-da. The barbarians at the gate trying to take away your way of life. It's like, holy fuck.
Yeah. Next, he'll be telling you can't burn tyres in your backyard. An Australian right.
Well, it was interesting. I sort of went on to, I wanted to see like how far this had reached and what the kind of supporters of, you know, the right-wing commentators were saying. And even on the Facebook page for news.com, like there's very little support for, you know, the Liberal government on this. And there's very little support of people who are trying to deny this because like you say, it's affecting, if it doesn't affect you directly, you at least know someone who it's been affected by. I mean, my sister works at the Department of Conservation in WA at the moment. So she and I have been messaging. She's on fire. I'm underwater. Like it's insane what's going on right now. And I think you just can't, that kind of smoke and mirrors game is not really working anymore. Or I should say smoke and water game is not really working anymore. Everyone's sort of seeing through it.
Well, what I just like, because I do think that those extreme climate deniers have been exposed. I think that we've got to a point, even like, you know, even News Corp have kind of got to the point where the majority of their commentary, they were climate deniers for so long, and they've made a public stance to say that they're, you know, now climate delayers, basically. You know, they're not deniers anymore; they're delayers, and that is what they're doing now, right? Like it used to be where climate deniers, it's not happening. Now they're at the stage of it's happening, but you know, there's not that much we can do about it, or we've got to do it slowly. Or
China
you know,
and India, if they don't
right?
change if they don't change their emissions, and what's the point of us doing it? Well, we can stop selling to them. That's the point of it.
Also, remember when they were wrong about the last bit that they've now accepted that they were wrong about? Let's you know what? Strike one and let's assume they're also fucking wrong about what they're telling us now. Why would we trust the people? This is my main problem with net zero by 2050 is that it gives people the impression that we're doing enough, which we're absolutely not doing enough. And the main reason you can know that net zero by 2050 is an absolute fucking con, so that the robber barons can. The analogy that I would use, right, is that I remember when Limo and I were doing Triple M Drive, right, and they sacked us, but they left us on air for 6 weeks. Well, guess what we did in those 6 weeks? Whatever the fuck we wanted and stole everything. That is what the fossil fuel companies are doing by us delaying, you know, the shutdown of it. They're just going, well, we'll delay it as far as we can, and then we can just come in and we can steal as much stationery in the meantime as we possibly can. And you know that that's happening because News Corp think that net zero by 2050 is a good idea. The same people who brought us for the last 30 years, climate change isn't real and isn't happening, and got us into the place we are now saying this is a great plan. And people go, okay, well, I guess that's a good plan. No, that's not a good fucking plan.
Yeah. It's funny too, isn't it? Like that there is this kind of, there is this idea that, look, we're delivering above and beyond. And it's like, yeah, but that's not good enough. It's not, you can say, yeah, we're doing enough, but we're not, obviously. Look what's happening. You say, hey, mate, I'm giving you 100%. Well, you have to give 150%. I know that is statistically impossible, but like, it's not working right now. And all this kind of, I mean, I don't really know, because there's so much misinformation out there. Someone should do a show about it, Will. It'd be really interesting. I'd watch it. But there's so much misinformation out there when you sort of try and when you go online and you read the commentary on Twitter or whatever, to know like what is actually how people feel. And then there's the polling of it, where because people seem to be largely in favor of all these kind of like more environmentally friendly policies. But does anything get done, or is this? I sometimes wonder: is it just all theatre? Like it's just, we get upset, and then you'll read an article about from the whatever side of politics you're into, and that kind of assuages whatever you're feeling at the moment, and you forget about it until the next kind of disaster. Do you know what I mean?
Well, the fact that it became political that's dumb to me, right?
Yeah.
The idea that the survival of the planet is a political issue is dumb. And the minute that we allowed it to become a political issue, we fucked up everything. There should be some things as human beings, regardless of the political differences we have, the idea that people have cultural and political differences and they go to war against each other and all these things that happen as human beings. I would have thought that our overall thing has to be the survival of the human race. Right?
It's fine.
Like,
That's
the
fine,
planet,
mate.
the livability of the planet, the perfect planet that we live on that is so unique in the universe, like might be the only one in the universe, at least in the time frame that we live in, that can support the sort of life that we are. Isn't our major responsibility as human beings to protect, the survival of humankind and also the survival of the planet that gives us life and gives... I mean, we've been so ruthlessly just eliminating other species from this world. Like the idea that species after species, many of which have been here for thousands, tens of thousands, or even longer years than we've been on this fucking planet, and we just rolled into town and fucking just like, you're dead, never coming back, bye, don't need you, cut you down, fuck you up. And then the fact that that might lead to the actual... it shouldn't be a political issue. But the reason it's a political issue is fucking simple. It's like money in politics, right?
Yeah, and it's also
like Margaret Thatcher was on the record. Like Margaret Thatcher, a conservative leader, she was one of the original people like who made, really big headway on the idea that climate change was a real thing and it shouldn't be a party political issue. And then the oil companies came in and they made it, the fossil fuel companies came in and made it a political issue. They knew earlier than everybody else that the climate was changing because they had the money and the incentive to do some research on it. And they discovered it was them who was mostly responsible for it. And then they spent millions of dollars putting out disinformation and misinformation over decades so that they could keep doing it.
It's also feels like, when they trot out like your Pauline Hanson or whatever to do, or your Malcolm Roberts to be like, oh, the climate's always changing. It's like, oh, fuck. Like, at least come up with a better new argument. Like, just, you conspiracy theorists, right? You guys are batshit insane. Just come up with something better. Like, it's so lazy that you're still going to trot out that same old trope, which at least if you're going to bullshit me, put some effort into it. I want to hear a new theory, space laser theory, whatever the fuck it is, why this is normal.
Well, it's absolutely not normal. Like, what people sometimes argue is the idea that, like, we've been a country that's always had extreme weather, right? Which is true. But the problem with this is that climate change, like global warming, climate change, climate emergency, it's all going to essentially whatever your worst character traits were before. It's like getting superpowers, and the superpower like accentuates whatever you were originally, but that becomes like, just so Australia was already a place of dramatic weather conditions. Of course, when things get even more dramatic, we're just going to find that we still have floods, we still have fires, but the fires are bigger than they ever were. The floods were bigger than they ever were.
And it gets closer and closer together. I mean, that's the thing that I think some people don't understand is they're like, floods happen, fires happen. It's like, yeah, but what you're going to find is that shit's happening all the time now. Like, even anecdotally, you sort of speak to people in this area and they'll talk about, it was always like a wet February up here. And it's like, yeah, but now it's wetter for longer and it's more, and when it rains, it's flash flooding. Like you and I were both just in town today and it only rained for about 20 minutes, but in that 20 minutes, like all the gutters filled up, the roads were covered in water, like everything got absolutely hammered. And that was in like a short space of time.
And, you just see gutters on, reasonably new buildings just like overflowing because obviously it's been raining for 3 months and there's only so much in a safety sense, that you can get on your roof to clean your gutters, even in times when you need to do things like that, right? Like This is it. Every single little thing becomes like it takes us an hour longer to get to town than it ordinarily would. Now that's fine and reasonable and we can deal with that sort of thing. But if you're somebody who has to go that road every day for your job or you work or to visit a relative in hospital or to take your kids to school, or, I mean, where I live, the school bus now can't come through anymore,
Yeah.
right? Like the school bus just can't come through anymore. So there are parents at the moment hiking their kids through like a road that has basically has, signs on it that says don't go down this road. But the parents are hiking their kids through these like fallen trees and stuff to be able to get them to a bus stop so they can go to school.
I love, did you see Peter Dutton? Peter Dutton getting grilled by Koshy was not something I thought I'd ever see. But there's this tactic that they're using at the moment, this, human shield thing, where it's like, why weren't the army sent in sooner? I won't let you criticize the brave members of the ADF. No, we're not criticizing them. We're criticizing the people who get them in sooner. Why has there been such a debacle at the nursing homes? Oh, you can't criticize healthcare. We're not criticizing healthcare workers. Again. We're asking why decisions at the top have been so bad or so slow to be put into action. But it's this really, I think once you sort of
it's a deliberate technique.
Oh, of course.
Right?
Obviously. And it's across
if you don't support the war, you hate the troops, right?
Yeah.
It's been something that's been around for a long time. No, I think in a general sense, the Defence Force are at their most useful defending Australia. The biggest threat that this country should have in a defence sense, like we should defend the country from being invaded by diplomacy. That's how we should defend Australia. We should defend the country against the weather by having this like armed forces and these people who are trained in these situations hand to be able to deal with these.
We should be shooting guns up at the sky. That's
what I'm saying. Yeah, I'm
shoot
saying
some missiles at the clouds.
Shoot some tanks at a cloud occasionally as a warning.
Yeah,
and maybe it wouldn't fucking rain around.
Kill one cloud, educate 1,000. That's what I'm saying.
Right. That's what we do. We're going to send a tank into space. This is our idea. We're going to send it, not to space, but just up higher.
The lower atmosphere, the stratosphere. We'll send it.
We need a flying tank. This is like an Armageddon sequel. So we need some people. We need to send some people who can shoot. Oh, yeah. Great. Fast and the Furious 11. Vin Diesel drives a car into space to shoot a cloud. As a warning against climate change.
Or how about we take a cloud hostage? That'd scare the shit out of them. We take a cloud hostage. We bring it down here. We tie it up. We get it to hold a newspaper, and we record a video.
Cut off its ear. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just say, you fucking keep raining on us. This guy is going to get bloody evaporated real quick. We're just standing there with hair dryers.
Yes. Okay. So we've got a cloud and a hairdryer. Mate,
we'll fucking do it, man.
Fuck off with your floods. You know where you can rain? Fucking ocean, mate. Go and rain in the fucking ocean. But otherwise, we fucking put this hairdryer on.
Go to a desert. Ruin another George Miller movie, for fuck's sake. Leave the Northern Rivers alone. That's what I'm saying.
Not in my backyard.
Speaking of being harassed, I was in the midst of all this fucking shit this week. I almost got scammed by a phone scam. And it was one of those things where it's been a shit day, pissing down with rain, dealing with a kid, all this kind of stuff. And when I arrived home, I was sort of checking my phone as I was carrying shopping and baby upstairs. And I got a text message from my bank saying, your net bank's been disabled. And I had been changing some stuff around on my net bank and doing some online stuff, which in a split second when my mind's elsewhere, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I probably just need it. So I hit this link. And then I, put Iona down. And then it was saying that I needed to log in and blah, blah, blah. And I was about to do it. I just was not thinking. And so I started and then I I looked at the URL because when I clicked the link, it took me to a Safari page on my phone. And it was Combank, but bank was spelled BANKK. So I was like, shit, I hit the link. And so I call the bank, they call their fraud department or whatever it is. And firstly, there must be a lot of frauds going on right now because when you go on NetBank and you check out fraud, they give you a list of the latest frauds and it's so long. Like there's literally 40 frauds currently active that you should look out for, like the specific messages and emails and text messages and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, while I'm on hold, I keep getting, and the other thing too is the text came from the Commonwealth Bank. Like that's why I thought it must be real because the previous messages in that thread were all legit ones from the Commonwealth Bank. So it was really well disguised. But then I start getting sent these prompts on my phone, text messages. You know how you get sent a net code? So it's like, log in with this net code. And I'm like, fuck. And it kept like, and I was getting freaked out because it was like every 5 minutes it would send me another prompt. Hey, dude, just log in. Just log in.
Come on,
So
man.
I'm sweating going, is this
Why
like
are you logging in? Just fucking log in, man.
Yeah, that was really, but it was like, is this like a bot, or is this someone actually kind of, in Russia or somewhere, just, well, maybe not Russia, but, somewhere, like some hacker trying to get my bank details. So the guy came on, and the thing was, because my brain had been so occupied with other things, I couldn't entirely remember how far through the scam I had gotten. I knew I'd clicked the link, but had I put in my client number, because I also remember I was like, that's weird that it hasn't taken my app, and I opened my app, and then I was like, I got confused between, was I using the app or was I using this dummy website that the scammers had set up? So he was running the guy, and then I started getting real paranoid and was like, am I actually talking to a guy from the Commonwealth Bank, or have they like hooked up my phone to some kind of, because they got my phone now, they obviously know my number. Am I talking to some
Fuck, man, reality's a simulation.
Simulation, yeah. And so he was looking through all the bank accounts. He's like, look, there hasn't been any suspicious activity. So I think it's all okay. He's gone, but it's weird that they have your number and they keep sending you text messages. So I'm going to refer you to like another fraud department. So I got referred to another fraud department, and I kept getting passed up and up the chain, and I was sweating because I'm like, fuck, like, why are they sending me to such senior dudes? I've really fucked this. And so they were baffled. They hadn't seen, this was a new scam, apparently, wasn't on their list. And one that kind of freaked them out a bit, because they said, well, obviously they're aping our phone number, like it's some kind of like, what do you call it? Like cloaking device or something that makes it look like a Commonwealth number. And the fact that they could then hold on to my number and then reuse it. So they said, look, we've shut everything down. We're just going to, we've shut everything down. You need to go on now and just redo all your passwords for everything, for your net bank, for your phone password, all this kind of stuff. And then they had to ask me my security questions. Now, I'm not sure if you remember this story. In one of the very early episodes of TOFOP, I spoke about having to do like a security question clearance. And it was back in the days where you'd pick your own questions. And when I used to play junior footy, after a win, we had this like call and response thing, which was like the coach would go, did you win? And then we'd say, we shitted it in. How did you do it? Easy. And so that was my security question like 20 years ago. And I told this story about how embarrassing it was. The lady was like, okay, the first question is, did we win? And I had to say, yes, we shitted it in. How do you spell shitted it? How'd we do it? Easy. So, all well and good. And I thought that was the last of my ridiculous question and answer, security question and answers. But this guy's gone, okay, Mr. Clausen, we just have to ask you some security questions. And I can tell you these now because I've changed it. But see if you can answer these two security questions well. Both are based on popular 80s films. Mm-hmm. So the first security question is, who's the moosiest moose we know?
Who's the moosiest moose we know? Bullwinkle?
No. Oh, great. Well, look, I would hope that you were the hacker trying to get my details, because that is a line from Vacation where Chevy Chase and the family are singing, who's the moosiest moose we know? Marty Moose. Who's the moosiest? So the answer was Marty Moose. And then the second question, it's, I'll give you a hint. So this is a sequel to an incredibly popular 80s film. Mm-hmm. The question, an incredibly popular 80s film that has since been rebooted as a TV series. But the question is, live or die, man.
Lethal Weapon.
No.
Damn it.
Karate Kid 2, in which Mr. Miyagi says, Ralph Macchio says live or die. And when the guy says die, he honks his nose. He goes, honk. So that was my answer to my security question, was honk. So Gemma was listening in the other room. So I got off the phone with this guy, and she's like, wasn't you worried about a scam? She's gone, why were you saying honk to the guy on the telephone? I'm like, because I'm a fucking idiot. And so now, like, I think maybe I'm not the only one.
Here's what I would say, though, is this is one of those times where they're glad that they record these calls for quality assessment, because you definitely are making some sort of mixtape at the Commonwealth Bank for the end of the year.
Christmas party.
for training. They're like,
Yeah.
you know, when they're training, like people had to deal with like the weird requests that you're going to get or the weird things you're going to have to deal with. They're going to play that. They're going to be like, it's actually the guy from Home and Away. You're going to love this, guys.
So now, because when you go on, they actually give you preset questions. There's like 30
Mm.
questions you can choose from,
Yeah.
like, you know, what was your primary school, or where's your favorite holiday destination, or whatever. But with those questions, are you, like, when you pick your answers to those, are you picking one that's just going to be easiest for you to remember? Or are you picking ones that are going to be hardest to guess for like a hacker? Like, what's your rationale with your security questions and answers?
Easiest for me to remember, but
Yeah.
not things that people would know about me from. So I have, I think, a smaller list, and
Right.
probably you as well from doing this podcast, but me from, you know, obviously, you know, having written bloody columns and like been on the
There's
radio
a lot of
and
info
like
about you out there.
so much information about me, like, yeah, where I grew up, what, yeah, it'd be so easy to find out, like, you know, the road that I grew up on from a series of jokes that I did about the name of the road that I grew up on, you know, like where I was born, like what my mother's maiden name was, any of those sort of things, names of your first pets, all those sort of things have been stuff that I have talked about. So I normally have to go a bit deep on there. I'm like the pitcher, and the catcher keeps like, you know, going, send this pitch down. You know, I want to see the curveball, and I'm just shaking it off. Can't answer that one either, mate. You're going to have to go lower on your list. What else you got?
Well, then there's also the question of like how you actually, you know, because you've got to be like, you know, you've got to, are you uppercase, lowercase, are you using punctuation, like all that kind of stuff. And then I'm like, some of these answers are a bit complex. And so I'm sort of treading the line between, well, this is kind of not easy to guess, but I don't think, I still, as ridiculous as it is, did we win? We shitted it in. Like the only hacker who was going to guess that was someone who played under 11s football with me at the East Brighton Vampires, I reckon. And even then, I doubt their recall would be that good.
Also, obscure trivia from, like, I mean, you went Karate Kid 2 and, you know, Vacation. It wasn't like you went the two biggest movies on the planet where whatever like, what is life like in Forrest Gump? And then someone could just go, oh, yeah, a box of chocolates. Right. Okay. I'm in. Right.
Go ahead, make my blank.
Yeah.
Well, that was the point. I went obscure.
Is it bed? Oh, I didn't get in. I thought it was bed.
Although we do live in an era of like fan service and the 80s is back in nostalgia, maybe it was the right time to erase those 80s references from my online banking, because everyone, like, you know, there's a fucking Cobra Kai TV series. I'm sure Vacation will be getting a reboot soon. And all those films, all those TV shows, they just love a fucking reference to every scene and every bit of art direction, every bit of costume that was meaningless or had a minor bit of meaning in the original is now like, oh, this is how so-and-so got his hat. This is why so-and-so drives this car. It's like, yeah, so Marty Moose would be getting his own series soon.
No, you're right about that. Like, the references become more common. Also, you know, the 80s were a long time ago. You don't know how politically correct your answers are. You know, it might be, who are your three favorite heroes? And you're like, Mel Gibson, Woody Allen, and Michael Jackson.
Suddenly you're red flagged. ASIO knocking on the door.
But also, I think that have you watched Bel-Air? Have you watched any of the gritty reboot of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
Well, it's funny you should say that, Will. Why don't we get to our mailbag? Because our very first question is about that very subject. This is from Luke. He says, I know this is a well-traveled TOFOP area, but with the gritty reboot of The Fresh Prince, just wondering what's next. Maybe the Bob Morrison show, where Bob is an airport sniffer dog on the take. Or what would a gritty reboot of the Tatslotto number reading look like? Missed you guys over the summer break. Have a great year, Luke. So tell me all about look, I must say, I never really watched the original Fresh Prince, so I don't have an opinion on this either way.
Okay, so I loved the original show. Thought it was super funny. Yeah, and Will Smith was like, you know, clearly a star immediately. It has that iconic theme song, you know, that everybody knows. And that is, so I think I've only watched one episode, but so far I really liked it. I think it works.
Is it gritty?
I mean, yes, I guess so. Like, the premise of the theme song, you know, the idea that, like, he's West Philadelphia, born and raised. In the playground is where I spent all of my days. So anyway, the whole idea is he gets into like a beef with a drug dealer. You know, that's kind of the premise of the original one, is that he gets into some trouble and then, you know, they're worried about him, so they send him out but they play it for comedy. But in this, the actual setup of that song, the storyline, the idea that he is this kind of like smart mouth kid living in West Philly, growing up in West Philly, and then like gets into a beef, and it's actually an accidental beef. It was something that he didn't do but got blamed for, and like this drug dealer basically wants to kill him and his friend. And so I guess that is gritty, right?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really lend itself to a live studio audience, does it?
I mean, the weird thing is because the song was so catchy, you forgot how gritty it was in the first place. Like these guys are playing it the right way. It was weird that it was being played for laughs. You're like, there's this, oh my God, it makes me laugh so fucking much. But Gary Goldman, do you know who Gary Goldman is, the comedian? Brilliant comedian. But he does this thing where like he does Rodney Dangerfield jokes, but really empathizing with Rodney Dangerfield. Like, you know, so it's like,
getting no respect.
Yeah, like, and he goes, you should get some respect, you know, like that's a bad thing, man. And you know, I saw Rodney, and Rodney said he went to the doctor, and he said, you're fat. And he said, I want a second opinion. He said, you're also ugly. I said, Rodney, that's not acceptable from your medical professional. That's bullying. Like, that is not what, like, and I think that's how I'm revising the old Fresh Prince. They were covering a lot of trauma through humor. Like it's an interesting storyline. So the setup is basically that his rich uncle, so I reckon it's his mum's sister who is she's married into immense wealth in Bel-Air. The dude that she's married to, he is like a big fancy, like he's a DA or like a fancy criminal litigator. He's running for office, like, you know, that sort of thing. Respected, filthy rich community, but he's pulled a few strings to make sure that Wil didn't get in trouble. So there's going to be that storyline that like maybe he's overstepped the line a little bit to get Wil out there, and his political enemies might go after him for that. And then, so like basically you've got Carlton, who's the sort of snobby older brother, you know, character that you would, you know, kind of remember. And he in this is very much that sort of, the way that they portray him is he's like very entitled rich, very suspicious about like, you know, cool Wil coming along. He plays lacrosse. He's got a bunch of frat boy bros who sing the N-word, and he doesn't like it. Like he's cool with it, if you know what I mean, like because they're singing a song. Like,
are they white frat boy friends, right?
Yeah,
well, that's interesting. Yeah,
and then you've got the sort of older sister who's like much more lovely to Wil, but she's an influencer. Like she's like that. She doesn't really have like a job, but she's like an influencer and like a social. So it kind of works as it's one of those things where you're just like, this story works very well in this modern context. Whether they'll be able to sustain it as a drama over. Like
I was going to say, so it's a drama, so it's not at all like there's laughs, but it's not like a comedy by any stretch.
There's comic relief. You know who the main comic relief is so far?
Who?
Well, Wil gets sent a limo or whatever, a car to the airport when he arrives in LA. But you know the thing is, he doesn't take that car. He takes this fancy old school American muscle car that's driven by this guy called Jeff. And you might find that this Jeff guy might be a little jazzy, if you know what I'm saying. Might like to DJ this Jeff character.
Jazzy Jeff got to eat. Good on you, Wil. All these years later looking after your mate. He's done an Adam Sandler. Here's a job. There you go. Hey, we've got a message here. Apparently, Kyle Sanderlands, according to the first and last name of this listener, has written into us. Big fan of the show. It says, an NZ invasion. Hello, Wil and Charlie. I have missed listening to your nonsense over the summer. I'm very glad you guys returned to the podcast ways. With all the global issues going on at the moment, it got me wondering, when NZ inevitably snaps and tries to invade Australia, which comedian do you think will be best placed to lead the Australian people as Prime Minister, and lead us into battle to fend off those dastardly Kiwis? I tend to think it'll be Carl Barron or Dave Hughes, but I'm not so sure that would be the best fit in those circumstances. Obviously, reference to Vladimir Zelensky. Not Vladimir Zelensky. What's his first name? Zelensky, the Ukrainian president. Who
I think everybody knows who he is. He's a former comedian, played the leader of the country on a TV show, and then actually became the leader of the country.
But do you feel a bit uncomfortable with I don't know what the word is, but it's kind of like the glorification of him as like this kind of heartthrob, leader. Like there's people, there's like these BuzzFeed type articles, which is like 19 photos of Zelensky that'll melt your heart. And it's like, his fucking country's been invaded right now. Like, it just feels so gross that there is this kind of really vapid analysis of him. Oh God, he's so sexy. What a sexy leader. He could be the next James Bond. It's like, what the fuck? Are you guys watching the same news that I'm watching right now?
But also there is this thing about, I guess, power and like fame that is very intoxicating to people, which is often people get into it for the wrong reasons because they're like, if I become famous, people will want to fuck me. If I want to, if I become powerful, people will want to fuck me. And often you kind of think that's deluded until these people become famous and powerful, and then you realize everyone wants to fuck them, and you're like, oh, they were actually right.
It really is true.
Remember during the pandemic, like there was just lists of who the hottest chief
Doctors
health officers
Yeah.
were. You're like,
everything becomes a fucking BuzzFeed like list or article. It's
Right.
crazy.
yeah, rate them in order of how you want to fuck them. That's what we're going to do with climate scientists. We've got to get climate
Yes.
scientists out there enough that like BuzzFeed does a list of who the most fuckable climate scientists are.
This is from Snert Underpants. Hi, chaps. I've only recently discovered your brilliant podcast, and I'm delighted to finally find one that addresses the mindless minutiae that resides in most male brains in such detail. However, I often listen to you in bed late at night, and herein lies my problem. I sometimes find myself dreaming that I am in the same room as you guys, and I can still hear your voices after I nod off. But when I interact with you, I'm completely ignored. It's like you don't even realize I'm there, which I find a bit rude. This has caused me to wake up quite irritable and is making me reassess my initial favorable opinion of you two as decent blokes. I would have expected better treatment as a loyal fan of 10 Days. What have you got to say to Snert?
I mean, I would say, Snert, you're putting a lot of blame on us for something that is not our responsibility at all.
lot of
We don't
projection.
recommend you listen to this podcast to go to sleep. Not once ever. In fact, on other times when people have suggested that that's what they do, I've been against it, to be honest. Like, I'm not going to tell people how to live their lives, but I'm against it for this very reason. Like, if we're suddenly in your dreams, if we're Inception style inside your head, and then suddenly you're like getting mad at us for not behaving the way that you want us to behave in your imagination, then look, that's tough for us to be able to refute, isn't it? Like, it's tough for us to be able to.
Oh, yeah. And it's also like, the way your brain works while going into sleep, and, the fact that it's just sort of your subconscious sort of like, just putting stuff away in your brain, like you are giving us identities that are actually part of your subconscious. So if we're shitting you, you know what's going on? You're shitting yourself. Did you win? You
It's
shitted
your
it.
Will and Charlie. It's your own version of Will and Charlie that shit you, not us, the people, what your brain imagines us to be.
This is from Ian. It's not really worth reading out, but the last line was worth it. Hi, Will and Charlie. Missed you guys over the summer. To make up for your absence, I made models out of you out of cardboard boxes. We then went on picnics together. I feel that Cardboard Will and Charlie are my best friends, and we go to the pub together at least once a week. They're a bit quiet, though. My knob is enormous. Love, Ian. I mean, we get all kinds listening to this show, don't we? High class.
You know what? Like
clientele.
the world has just, we've all lost it a bit, haven't we?
I think so.
It's just
The quality of just.
I mean, how can you look at the world and exist in this world at the moment and not be a little bit affected by it and want to just, I don't know, cut out some. I think that, who was that listener?
Ian.
Ian's get together with the previous listener,
Oh, yeah.
and I think between the voices in his imagination, like maybe they could go out together, and this guy could do the voices for the cardboard cutouts.
Oh, can defend
of
us.
the Will and Charlie that he already has. Yeah.
Yeah. So the previous listener, the dream listener who's got the issue with us, maybe Ian can come to our defense as with Cardboard Will and Charlie. That makes sense. Let's finish on this one, Will. This is from Simone. The subject is the problem with TOFOP.
Oh, no. Okay.
Where do we start? I listen to a lot of news and political podcasts, and TOFOP is a welcome break in my new episodes list each day. I've added the problem with Jon Stewart to my podcast list recently, and it has a similar guitar intro to TOFOP. It's very strange to feel ready for accusations of bin misconduct and conversations about Batman and time travel, and instead get a deep dive into problems with the stock market or violent crime in America. It's an unpleasant albeit amusing juxtaposition. I love your work and I'm grateful for your podcast. Simone. She got us. She said she had a problem with it, but she actually was giving us a compliment. I like that.
Yeah, it was a play on words. That's what I liked.
We have, but the last 2 episodes, we've talked a lot about serious issues. We get to the last eventually, but it's a bit hard to avoid talking about serious issues at the moment, isn't it?
I mean, speaking of serious issues, so you talked before about what do you do to contribute, and I know that you've been out there in the community, and I think, we're cooking some stuff today to take into one of the centres tomorrow, and we've got a bag full of stuff, some more stuff to take in as well, and you try to contribute in that way. But there is another way that I can contribute. So next Saturday night and the following Saturday night, so that'll be the 19th and the 26th, I believe, at the Brunswick Picture House in Brunswick Heads, one of the communities that was a bit affected by what has been going on. And the Brunswick Picture House was actually being used as an emergency centre for people who had been unhoused or needed to pick things up and all those sort of things. So I am going to do 2 shows of my improvised show, What You Talking About, Will? 2 nights. To be honest, if we sell more than enough tickets, I'll do 2 shows on the day, raise as much money as we possibly can. So all the money that I raise from those shows will be going to local community charities. I'm trying to work out what the best way to distribute it is, because at the moment, you've got your big sort of huge charities, and we've found with even money we raised in the past for bushfires and stuff that sometimes you worry that you raise all this money and then it doesn't get to the people who are in the emergency. And because we live in the community, I'd much rather, try to get the money to people who actually practically need it in the moment. So trying to work out what the best way to distribute that money is. But
air cannon?
Like it might be give it.
Like you're at the basketball, just like air cannon. Just stand on the top of Brunswick Picture House with an air cannon, just firing out cash.
You know what? Guys, I know that making it rain has had a negative connotation for a little while here, but I mean, just walk into the Mullumbimby Hall and just start Drake at a nightclub. Just start making it rain.
Amy walks in behind you carrying a ghetto blaster. Dun, 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 dun. You're just standing there. Look, I know everyone feels like you've lost your dignity.
Making it rain. Here you go, guys.
Get on your hands and knees and pick up these notes. There you go.
She's playing Milli Vanilli's Blame It on the Rain. I'm like, is any of this on the nose? This is helping, right? I'm a hero. So 2 shows at the Brunswick Pitch House, or 2 nights. If there's demand for more than 2 shows, I'll do more than 2 shows. And the entirety of my money going to help people in the local community. And then on Monday, the 28th, maybe, I think it is, at Twin Towns on sort of the near the border of New South Wales and Queensland. There will be a huge comedy night there featuring Mandy Nolan, Ellen Briggs, who are both locals of this community, myself, Tom Gleeson, and Kitty Flanagan. So again, we're not asking anybody for donations or anything like that. That's for other people to coordinate. We're just going to put on a comedy show that hopefully would sell out with that lineup regardless. But just all the money that we raise is going to go to support local community charities who need the money right now. So those 3 gigs, if you're in the local area or nearby and you have the capacity to come to a show and all the money going to help the community. Oh, speaking of Northern Rivers people, who need help, I'm also doing some shows for me. Melbourne Comedy Festival, Sydney Comedy Festival, Brisbane Comedy Festival. I'm doing Willogical and What You Talking About, Will, and they are all on sale now.
Speaking of other people, Northern Rivers people who need support, we have a Patreon page, patreon.com/TOFOP. We put up full episodes of the podcast there, full video episodes, so you can see Will and I, our faces as we talk, if you want to do that. There's also brand new episodes of Evan Relax, the comic strip that James Fosdyke is working on. And what's the other thing I need to promote as well? No, that's it for Patreon. But 2 Guys, 1 Cup is back this week. In fact, today, when this episode comes out, there will be a brand new episode of 2 Guys, 1 Cup. We have moved exclusively to the listener app. I know there's been some disgruntled listeners out there who don't want to download a free app to listen to a free podcast, look, I completely get that. If it's too much, then that's too much. But for the people who do want to listen to this show who can't because they listen overseas, we think we've found a workaround, which is the episodes will still be going up on TOFOP.com. So you can still listen to the show on TOFOP.com. So if you're an international listener, a VPN should help you with that solution. I know it's not perfect. We're trying to work on something else to make it easier for listeners overseas to listen to it, but you can still hear the show if you desperately want to. And look, it's something that we need to do to keep the show going, right? Will, we do a lot of podcasts. We finally found a way we can monetize one of them. It's still free for you guys to listen to. I understand you have to download a new app, and that's annoying, but that's what we needed to do to keep the show running.
Yeah, not just keep that show running, but to keep all our the shows that we're doing running. It's been a hard time for everybody over the last 2 years, and it's been incredible the support that people have given us, but there's only so much money you can ask of people who don't have that much money themselves at the moment, and we don't want to be on here every week begging for you guys to give us money. We would still love you to support our Patreon, and we hope there's value in the Patreon for you. That makes it worth actually just signing up to the Patreon anyway. But we needed to do something, and our big priority was that it was still free to listen to. We hadn't actually really because there's been so much other stuff going on, international listeners, we hadn't really had that top of mind. Being a podcast that is about a sport that's only really followed in 3 states of Australia, we didn't really think about international listeners when we were originally doing it. And so we're trying to find, good workarounds for people who want to listen from overseas. But if you're in Australia, I also get that it's annoying. A couple of shows that I listen to are on different apps, and of course it's annoying. But once you have the app on your phone or whatever, it's actually just it's fine. You just go and you find the app, and it's going to give us the capacity to do a better job with that podcast, but also, be able to support our other podcasts.
I did get the sense from some people, though, that there was this idea that you and I had been seduced by like a big corporation that, somehow they'd sort of invited us in, like Rob Lowe in Wayne's World, and they had promised us the world.
Yeah.
Let me reassure you, no one has promised us fucking shit. It was literally a couple of phone calls and 3 emails, and Will and I going, okay, I guess that can work. Yeah. So
they've promised us the equivalent of Elon Musk sending a few satellite phones to the Northern Rivers.
They saw what's left over from Hamish and Andy. They found some crumbs underneath their desk. They said, you guys can have that. But yes, like Will says, it helps us.
Basically, they said to us, this thing that everybody else thinks has no value, we think it has a small amount of value.
Everything can be found at tofop.com, all that information. And look, if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening in our universe, you can sign up for our newsletter. You just go to the website. Oh, and that's the other thing I wanted to say is I've finished the update. So all episodes of TOFOP are now back on the website. So I spent a few late nights just updating all that kind of info. So you can actually go to the website now and find everything, every podcast we do, everything you want to know. And if you want to find out what's happening during the week, you sign up for our newsletter. You'll get sent something on a Friday, which will just bring you up to speed on everything. But I think that's it, right? That's it. Let's finish the show, hey?
You normally say your name first, don't you?
Yes, waiting for you to say yes.
Yes. Sorry.
I know, but I was waiting for you to say, Charlie, we should finish the show.
Out loud permission, and I understand that. It's a good age of consent. It's a very valuable message to send.
Consent.
To our
enthusiastic.
Consent. Ask me again.
Will, should we end the show?
Yes.
I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson.
How long? Not long. Everyone relax. Fucking stupid.
This podcast is a TOFOP production.
Head to tofop.com for more.
Cool things for cool people.